Hey fans, did you know that Dash is the only digital auction platform built specifically for professional sports teams and their fan bases? It is also your place to score your favorite hockey team's most authentic memorabilia and game day experiences. Dash powers the auctions for your favorite AHL, ECHL, SPHL, NAHL, and USHL hockey clubs, plus many more across sports. Get in on the bidding now by texting DASH to 66866 or visit thesinbin.net and click on the word auctions in the upper right corner to find out the latest hockey auctions. Dash, making sports bidding so much easier in the digital age. This episode of the In the Corners podcast is sponsored by Sporfy, the sports video platform that allows you to instantly capture, replay, and share your favorite game highlights, all without having to film. For more information, visit sporfy.com or download the mobile app from the Google Play Store or the App Store.
Well, hello there, and greetings from the mile-high city of Denver, Colorado.
And Pasadena, Arizona.
This is the In the Corners podcast for Wednesday. Boy, that took some concerted effort to focus on. Wednesday, December 30th, 2020. And we welcome you to the Good Ship In the Corners for episode number 95. This is going to be our last voyage, as it were, on the Good Ship In the Corners because, well, we have a bit of a new endeavor that we are spearheading, and we're definitely going to leave it open a little bit. I'm sure, a lot of folks on Twitter have heard that I am going to be leaving the sin bin and taking on a new challenge, a new position over at a different website. And so Sean is coming with me. We're going to kickstart an AHL podcast over there. And gosh, Sean, are you feeling a little willy-nilly tonight? Do you want to reveal the name maybe later on in the show?
We'll save that one for the end. So you got to listen all the way to the end if you want the good stuff. But
exactly.
I'm definitely excited. It's going to be an interesting venture. We are a package deal for an AHL podcast, so that's how I look at it.
Hey, exactly. And I'm glad that Sean decided to complete the package deal again. And that couldn't be much further from the truth that we are a package deal. Yep. And we're going to be heading over to said website. But anyway, real quick, this is our last division of signings and re-signings that we are going to be covering in the AHL offseason. Hopefully we'll start February 5th like the league has wanted. But real quick, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that the Return to Play Task Force met this past Saturday. And the Board of Governors, the AHL Board of Governors, is actually going to be meeting the day of this episode drop, Wednesday, December 30th. So,
we're going to get news scooped. That's exactly what's going to happen.
What's going to happen?
We're going to get news scooped.
We always do. That's the thing. Like, we drop an episode, and then the day after, some big news happens.
Yep.
Just how it is.
Like, we tried to wait and see if we could get them to say something so we could talk about it, but it's been a couple days already. We got to put something out.
Exactly. And it's like Patrick Williams has done such a diligent job. Contributor to Elite Prospects, NHL.com for the AHL. And he, he's just like, he's talked with owners, the Syracuse Crunch owner, and he's got nothing. Like, it's just, he says it's changing. He's getting quotes from owners saying that it's changing from day to day. One day it's more optimistic than the next. And it's just like dealing with COVID-19 and the coronavirus in the real world. Every day is different. And, you got the first case of a coronavirus mutation here in Colorado today. So it's like, yeah,
it's wild.
It is wild. And we'll definitely see what exactly the Board of Governors meeting will decide tomorrow. So stay tuned for that, because we don't know.
Nobody does yet.
No, not yet. So, But what we do know is the Pacific Division, and we will start with one of three non-California teams in that division, the Tucson Roadrunners. So, Sean, you want to start this off, or you want me to take the reins and giddy up?
I'll take this one.
Okay.
We're going to start off with Dryden Hunt. He was signed with He was signed with Tucson October 10th. He's a free agent from Springfield. Last season, 35 games played, 3.08 point shares, good for the 92nd percentile on a per game basis, and a first line grade from the model. To the eye test, an average at best skater. His game has made strides the past few seasons. His puck skills aren't flashy, but they're very effective at the AHL level. I'd still like to see a little more physicality and ability to win battles in dirty areas, but he's been a consistent goal scorer in the AHL and a good trigger man on the power play, and goal scoring skills and shooting talent are the rarest things in hockey. Those are things you want for your hockey team. This is a good signing for Tucson.
Absolutely. Just as kind of Springfield got such a nice forward in Sam and Oss, now the Tucson Roadrunners are, obviously Dryden Hunt is no Sam and Oss. but yeah, I think, lose a forward, gain a forward. That's just how minor league hockey works.
Yep.
Roster changes and things like that. So without any delay, let's talk about Jordan Gross, a defenseman. He re-signed on October 10th, 56 games played in 2019-20, 4.18 point share in Sean's model. That's good for the 83rd percentile on a per game basis, a first pair grade for a D-man. Gross is an above average skater. He's got good but not great puck skills. He has a high hockey IQ. He reads the game well, and he's got the processing speed to be a top level AHL player, methinks. However, at his size, I don't think he skates well enough to be an NHL level talent. I do think his shooting percentage comes down after a hot year where he scored a lot on low percentage shot from outside the house, outside of home plate there in front of the goal. Regardless, I think he's a capable top four defenseman in the AHL. He's a good second pair anchor for Tucson with Kyle Capobianco anchoring their top pair. So yeah, I think, to bring him back, and we'll talk about Capobianco here in a second, but I think to bring him back and to, continue to maintain that defensive wherewithals, it's a good thing. I think it's a good re-signing for the Tucson Roadrunners.
And speaking of that top pair anchor, Kyle Capobianco re-signed October 5th, 42 games played in 1920, 4.97 point shares, good for the 100th percentile on a per game basis, and a top AHL defenseman grade from the model. The cream of the crop, according to the model. Capobianco was unquestionably a stud on defense last season and seems to be knocking on the door of a Coyotes roster spot full time. He is above average skating, but he uses it well. He joins the rush, engages in the cycle. His defensive game, he's not a shutdown guy, but it's good enough to not be a problem. His puck skills are polished though, and his shot is hard. If I'm Tucson, I'm trying to play him 26 minutes a night, if not more, especially for the duration of his time in the AHL, which I think might be fleeting. I think he's going to be getting some time in Arizona, and he definitely has earned that.
Yeah, absolutely. If your analytic model is projecting him in the 100th percentile, he damn well better get some time in the AHL. That's for sure. Real quick before we move on to Colorado, and my good friend Scott McDonald is going to be joining us shortly. But I noticed that, you jump on the sinbin.net, you go to the AHL offseason transaction page. This happened a lot with a lot of different teams, but especially with Tucson. These are all Arizona two-way NHL contracts. If you look at Tucson, and honestly, with the way that the season is and the taxi squad that NHL teams can have of 4 to 6 skaters, unlimited goaltenders and anything, Sean, looking back, does it kind of surprise, or does it not surprise you that a lot of AHL clubs, quote unquote, or NHL clubs signing AHL guys to these 1 year or sometimes 2 year two-way deals? It seemed like there was a lot more of those than NHL or AHL deals rather this year.
I think so. And I think a lot of that is the unknown, the uncertainty that was at the AHL level of what was going to happen. Like an NHL season, it seemed like everyone was sure in some form or another, one way or another, it was going to get hammered out and we were going to play NHL games. AHL games, we're pretty sure that's happening. But back in October, September, but these are guys you still wanted. And not to mention, you see a lot of these 1 year low salary cap kind of min deals, because that's also guys, GMs watched Vegas do some pretty nice bit of tidy business there at the draft, and decided that they didn't want to get shamed a second time by Seattle. So you're going to see a lot of these. And I think they're guys that are signing short-term, low-money deals so they can, if they have a good year, we can turn it around and see how that works out. Or we can just say, here you go, Seattle, have your choice from this guy that we're okay with maybe letting go instead of having to expose more talented players and having to pay for it. I think you're seeing a lot of that as well. So I think those two things combined are what's given us this kind of a larger than normal amount of two-way signings for 1 or 2 years at league min instead of AHL contracts or a longer term for more money.
That makes sense. Yeah, I'd forgotten about the Seattle expansion draft. I mean,
oh yeah.
Yeah. How could I forget? I don't know. It's been a long weekend. It's been a long week. It's been a long holiday season. Sean knows the details, but I digress. Let's move on to the Colorado Eagles. Let me introduce my good friend. Like I said, it's Scott McDonald. He's written with Mile High Hockey. He's currently with Colorado Hockey Now with longtime Avalanche beat reporter Adrian Dater heading up that endeavor. And Scott and I are going to be also moving over to full press coverage, full press hockey. And we're going to be having a podcast of our own called Front Range Hockey. Imagine that. We'll be covering the Avs. We'll be covering the Eagles, DU Pioneers, CC Tigers, Colorado College, and Air Force Falcons. So we are broadening our horizons quite a bit. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I bring to you Scott McDonald. Yeah.
Hey, what's happening, boys?
Hey.
Happy to be here.
You, man. There you go. Nice hoodie you got there, buddy.
Thanks. Yeah, we're just for this special occasion.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Yes, he changed out of his ugly Christmas sweater just for that.
I did.
Yeah. Well, Scott, let's get started, man. I mean, I know you and I have been talking Eagles prospects on the Colorado Eagles Tape to Tape podcast ad nauseum, but for the folks that are listening out in AHL world abroad, just in at large, that's the phrase I'm looking for. Sure. Let's talk about Hunter Miska, re-signed with the Avalanche on October 19th on a two-way contract. And Sean, take it away. I'll have Sean introduce it, and then Scott, you chime in.
Sure.
All right. So 26 games played last season, 0.275 goalie point shares per 60 minutes, and a 0.587 goal saved above average per 60 minutes. That was good for the 95th percentile, just missing that top AHL goaltender class was Hunter Miska. His game has gotten a lot more aggressive over time. He will definitely come out high on top of the crease to challenge shooters much further away than some of his peers, as well as much further away than he used to in previous seasons. His lateral movement is good enough, and his reading of the play has improved, but it's not quite there. There have been a few times where he has bitten on a shooter, faking a pass and ripping one past him. His rebound control is definitely the weakest part of his game, though, but it's not terrible. But there were definitely a couple of times where I watched rebounds that he should have been able to kick to a corner or have under control, and it went right out into the slot. Overall, though, I think Hunter Miska is still a very, very good AHL starter, but I don't know if I would put him quite in the awards category for goaltenders just yet.
I probably agree with you on that one too. I think he's a very serviceable goalie. Maybe that's probably the best word for it. He came in and stole the job from top Avs goalie prospect Adam Werner. I guess probably former top prospect now at this point. They drafted another pretty good one. It's playing over there in Finland, I believe. But yeah, Miska's great. Obviously the Avalanche like him a lot too. They called him up for the playoff bubble last year, and then honestly, I fully expect him. You guys were touching on the taxi squad a little bit before this, but I fully expect him to be that third goalie on the taxi squad for the Avalanche again this year. So Werner will get plenty of minutes, but I think Miska's in the AHL. If he stays there, I think he's a great goalie. He finished top 10 in goals against average, and I think top 5 in save percentage last year, and among goalies that played at least 25 games. And I think he's a fantastic goalie, and I'm sure Eagles country is hoping that he stays in Loveland for the AHL season and win, and if that happens, and I just don't know if he will, but yeah, good guy.
From one guy that signed an AHL deal last year and got the chance to sign that NHL contract in Hunter Miska, to another guy that got that opportunity this offseason, right winger Jason Magna, Liquid Hot Magna, signed an NHL deal on October 10th. 43 games played in 1920, 3.86 points shared, good for the 91st percentile on a per game basis, a first line grade from the model. Not too many AHL players come with a more grizzled veteran experience than Jason Magna. With stops in Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, Hartford, Utica, Hershey, and now Colorado, he's got 121 games of NHL experience picked up along the way. Magna, he earned quite a tracksuit collection, obviously, with all those teams I just mentioned, but he's got a lot of good skills. None that really strike me out as great, per se. He's a good skater. He's got good puck skills, good shot, typically gives good effort, albeit he rarely seemed to be taking full strides on the back check. I mean, he's no slouch either. 91st percentile in Sean's analytic model that he's got there. Jason Magna returning to the Colorado Eagles for next season if he's not on the taxi squad for the Avs.
Yeah, another one is, I think he might be maybe the oldest guy on the team now that I guess Connaughton and Conjure are gone now, but yeah, brings a solid veteran presence to the team for the forwards. That said, I think he's probably a strong candidate to wear another letter for the Eagles this year. I'm not sure if he's in the cards for the taxi squad for the Avalanche, so I fully expect him to rejoin the Eagles and be with them full time this year. And he's solid. You know, he finished what was like second in goals on the Eagles last year and top 5 in points. So the Eagles are bringing back a key player for their offense, and yet again, just a solid veteran presence as well.
Sean, you were going to say something and add to that too?
For me, the way I would imagine a lot of teams are going to construct their taxi squads is they're going to fill those taxi squads with guys who are going to be good in spot duty. NHL players with experience that you find, you know what they're going to be, you know that you can plug them into a third, fourth line role, put them out there for 14 minutes a night, and not have them, get you embarrassed as a GM or a coach. And I'm not sure if I think of Magna as being that guy, although he definitely seems like he would check a lot of those boxes, has the NHL experience, is a little bit older, is more of a known quantity. But I think of Magna as not being a good fit for a third line grinder in the NHL, where he's more of that middle six forward that's giving you more offense than defense. Plus, I think his veteran kind of leadership, as you said, is going to be more useful to developing guys in the AHL than, as a taxi squad guy.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that point. I think so as well. You guys think he might wear the C? I guess CC is probably more of a question for you. Do you think he could be the captain this year? I could see it. You
know what? I mean, with Alt going to Ontario, and we'll cover him later on in the show. Yeah, that opens up the captaincy. I mean, he's got the veteran experience, and he's definitely, in a word, yes.
To put it lightly, yes. Okay.
To put it lightly, yes. I won't elaborate too much on that because we got a lot of ground to cover. But
sure.
Michael Vecchione. Sean, take it away.
Signed on October 9th as a free agent from the no longer with us San Antonio. 61 games played in 1920, 3.52 point shares, good for the 75th percentile on a per game basis, and a second line grade from the model. An easy way to describe Vecchione is above average. He doesn't do anything great. Nothing wows me when I watch him, but nothing stands out as a negative. His puck skills don't have that smooth polish that you see from guys with a lot of NHL experience, but they're fine. He's not a speedster, but his skating is good enough. He's not much of a play driver. He's not a real finesse kind of guy. He's more blunt instrument. He's someone who you're going to see battling in the front, crashing the net, winning battles down low in dirty areas. And I think that's a good place for him. When he's on power play units, it's usually the second unit. He's definitely a guy who I would have as that net front at the 1-3-1. But I think he's a reliable middle six center for the Eagles next season. He's nothing flashy, but he does get the job done.
Scott, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail right on the head with that one. He's not going to flash you with anything in particular with his offense, but he does bring some offense. He's not maybe necessarily known for his stick handling or anything like that, but a very, very good above average puck possessor, strong on the puck. He's hard to push off, and plays a solid two-way game, which I think is something the Eagles were a box they were trying to check off this offseason. And CC and I have talked about it quite a bit as well. The Eagles, obviously, they're following a pattern this year with regards to adding size to the team. And he's a guy that kind of fits that bill as well. He's on the shorter side. I think he's 5'10", 5'11", but he weighs nearly 200 pounds. And again, plays hard. He's hard to push off the puck. And that in and of itself can drive some offense.
Yeah, and from one free agent acquisition to another, Kiefer Sherwood signed October 9th, a free agent from the San Diego Gulls and the Anaheim Ducks organization. 37 games played in 1920, 2.96 point shares. That's good enough for the 88th percentile on a per game basis and a first line grade from the model. So that's a solid acquisition. He does have averages skating paired, not compared. Sorry. Averages skating. You pair that with pretty good puck skills. There were a few times watching his film that I really felt that he tried to rely on his puck skills to get him out of jams, and he ended up turning the puck over, tried to get a little too cute with it. It wasn't too often, thankfully, but it definitely happened a few times. So otherwise than that, he's a solid defensive forward who reads the play well and in his own zone. Again, you mentioned Vecchione with the two-way forward label. I think that the Eagles organization pick up another good two-way forward with Sherwood.
Yeah, totally. And he can put some pucks in the net as well. I think he finished second on the goals last season and goals, despite playing like 10 less than Sam Carrick, who I think was their leading scorer. And he even got some games in the NHL last year, which is, every game counts. Every cup of coffee, as you like to call it, counts with regards to, just maturing and developing. And I think he's a guy that's going to bring some goal scoring to that top six or middle six for the Eagles. And it's another solid addition, another quietly good addition.
He was someone too last year that I felt that San Diego did not utilize to his full potential. They seemed to move him around a lot. They definitely did not play him like top 6 minutes, even though I felt like he performed well enough in a top 6 role to earn that ice time. But it seemed like in a lot of what I remember from his season last year, it was there were definitely a couple of moments where I felt like I hadn't seen him for half the period and like he didn't do anything to deserve to get benched. And I'd be interested to see how Colorado deploys him in this upcoming year.
So going from free agent acquisitions to re-signing, either Avalanche or Eagles, centerman Sheldon Dries. Sean?
50 games played in 1920, 3.57 point shares, good for the 85th percentile on a per game basis, and sneaking into that first line grade from the model. A good but not a great toolbox for Dries, but he's certainly getting the most out of his skill. His work ethic is really what drives his ability. He has good instincts and vision in the offensive zone, paired with puck skills that are more subtle than flashy. He's physical in front of the net and regularly back checks hard. Those are good qualities you get from a middle six center, someone who brings that 200-foot game and who's going to work hard and make sure that he pushes people in practice as well to keep up that work ethic.
And that's something he does regularly. The practices I attended, he's definitely in that leadership group. He wore an A last year. Fully expect him to wear an A or a C this year as well, if he's not on the taxi squad, that is. And the guys love him in the locker room. He's great on the ice. Obviously, he led the Eagles in goals, so that's always nice to bring those guys back as well. And just to have those guys when there's so much turnover rather in the AHL, it's nice to just bring those guys back from year to year to kind of have some familiarity and, again, leadership in the locker room. And I think that's exactly what they're getting with Sheldon Dries.
Yeah, and from one centerman to another, now we talk about the big acquisition, the big tuna acquisition, that is. Liam O'Brien, Sean's long-lost cousin, spelled the exact same way and everything.
Oh, yeah.
He signed. The signing announcement was on November 27th, so a bit later, as opposed to the big glut that happened there at the middle of October. Free agent, longtime Hershey Bears centerman, big fan favorite. Sean, you know him best. I'll let you talk about him.
Absolutely. Cousin Liam got 59 games played in 1920, 2.4 point shares, good for the 59th percentile on a per game basis, and a third line grade from the model. Cousin Liam was a fan favorite and teammate favorite in Hershey, and I don't expect that to change. He's a physical player, a hard worker, and what he lacks in refined puck skills and foot speed, he makes up for in defensive awareness, relentless back checking, and the ability to battle in front of the net, and is a quality special teams penalty killer. There definitely seems to be a theme here with these signings of you're getting a lot of physical, determined, hardworking two-way players. So their first three centers seem like they're pretty set of you're going to get a guy that is a 200-foot player who works hard and can bang some pucks home too. And that is very much Liam O'Brien as well.
Yeah, he might be one of the more underrated signings that I'm probably most excited about for the Eagles. I think they're going to love him in Eagles country. They like their physical players that like to drop the gloves and kind of muck it up in the corners, and I think that's exactly what they're getting with O'Brien. And he can score too. He had 10 goals last year, 15 the year before that, and that's always an added bonus too. But I think, yeah, again, like you kind of touched on there, and I touched on a little bit earlier, it's the Eagles had a game plan, and it was to get big and also obviously score goals, but they certainly got big, and they got a chippy guy with Liam O'Brien, and I think Eagles country is going to absolutely love this guy.
Yeah, they definitely seem like they have filled the box for defensive forward. I remember watching Liam too a lot, and it was amazing to me how many times he was right there with the defenseman on back checking. Like the puck's starting to go the other way in transition, he's right there.
Yeah, and to have that grit and to have that sandpaper to kind of put a little bow on these signings, Scott, once again, Scott and I on Tape to Tape, ad nauseum. The Eagles needed that this offseason. Craig Billington, Joe Sakic, they masterminded some great signings to really bring some muscle and some two-way guys that are just going to really, Lord willing and the creek don't rise, as we say in Idaho, really, really contribute in the AHL season, no doubt. So, yeah, I mean, it'll be exciting to see what that'll bring to Loveland and the Budweiser Events Center, be it a limited capacity of fans or no fans at all. So we'll see how that shakes out too. But Scott, thanks for joining us on the last episode of In the Corners, my friend. And where can people find your work?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, first of all. And yeah, you guys can find me on Twitter at offscottfree. And that off, it's the first zero, or the first O rather, is a zero. So it's 0FF Scott Free. You can find my work at Colorado Hockey Now alongside the great Adrian Dater. And yeah, season's starting up soon, so I'll be posting probably pretty much every day. And of course, me and Cece have our podcast coming up here soon too. So listen and follow along.
There you go. Scott, thanks for joining us, man. And talk to you soon, buddy.
See you guys. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Scott McDonald, Colorado Hockey Now, podcaster extraordinaire. Gosh, it was weird having you two on. I didn't want to call you the wrong names. I did that before the show started. I called him Sean. And yeah, well, actually, I called you Scott. I've called him Sean before, though. So,
well, I completely missed that. So,
yeah, well, that was before you got on. So, yeah. Anyway, but all right, chugging along. 2 teams down. 6 to go? Yeah, got 8 teams in this division. Here we go. San Diego Gulls. Do you want to talk about Patralski?
I do, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
I believe it's Podorowski, but that is one of the names in which I did not get to hear enough to feel confident in that pronunciation. Right. But that's because he only played 17 games in 1920. Good for only 0.31 point shares. He did not get a percentile ranking, as he did not get in enough games. But he is one of the best playmakers in the AHL, and he can run a power play from the half wall like few others. His skating isn't amazing, especially for a player of his smaller size, but he's got a lot of other tools in the toolbox that make up for it. Injuries took the 2019 Calder Cup MVP off the roster for all but 17 games, and a few of which that I saw he did not look at 100%. By all accounts, he's 100% healthy now and will use his excellent puck vision, excellent puck skills, and a pretty good shot to get San Diego back in contention.
Yeah, I think people forget that San Diego were in the Western Conference Final. It's it's just kind of a downplayed thing, or the Calder Cup Final rather.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just feels like so long ago, but then again in 2020, everything feels like it's been forever ago. So
yep.
All right. Second. Go ahead, Sean. What were you gonna say?
I was going to say, I'm so glad this year is almost over, but I have the feeling 2021 is just going to be weird.
It's going to be weird as well. But, at least we've got one calendar year that's just been a complete and utter cluster behind us. So we'll keep plugging along and just keep moving forward for sure. But yep. Andy Walensky, we go from an Andrew to an Andy Walensky. He signed on October 9th. He was a free agent from Lehigh Valley, but 4 years before that, he was in the Anaheim San Diego organization, so not a stranger to Gulls fans. 42 games played in 1920, 3.31 point share, good for the 86th percentile on a per game basis, and a first pair grade from the model. Walensky comes back to Southern California after a year with the Phantoms, as I previously mentioned. That went fine, but not up to the lofty standards that Walensky set in San Diego earlier in his career. His defensive game isn't great. He does lack that top-end polish you'd like to see from a guy who has NHL experience, but obviously 86th percentile, he's still a solid top pair AHL defenseman. The numbers show that, the analytics show that. So, yeah. Coming back to San Diego after, not a cup of coffee, but at least a season's worth of play over in Lehigh Valley.
Yeah, I just one thing too I'd like to add to that. I mean,
sure,
he has very good puck skills, good vision, and he's an incredibly good skater.
Fair enough. That helps as a defenseman too.
Yeah, he's definitely going to be an asset coming back to San Diego.
Very good. Well, hey, last but not least, just covering 3 skaters from San Diego because obviously there's a lot of ground to cover, as I mentioned. Vinny Lettieri. Sean, take it away.
Signed October 9th as a free agent after 4 years in the New York Rangers organization, mostly with Hartford. 61 games played in 1920, 5.13 point shares, good for the 90th percentile on a per game basis, and a first line grade from the model. I'm sure he's happy to be headed to an AHL team that might actually be a contender this year, as he's been toiling away in Hartford for 4 seasons, and they have been not great, Bob.
No, not great, Bob.
He has okay puck skills. He's a good skater with an excellent work ethic. He looks to fill that void left by Daniel Sprong on Power Play 1 across from Poldarowski. He definitely does not have the caliber of shot that Sprong had, but he's more than capable of being a quality trigger man on an AHL power play, and scoring power play goals is something every team always needs.
Yeah. Special teams, super important. I mean, it's kind of a well-done statement, but yeah, whenever you can get those special teams goals, that's it's an asset, to have a guy like that to contribute on the power play for sure. Mm-hmm. Any further thoughts on the San Diego goals? Let me take a look at any other signings here. Yeah, once again, we have another scenario where the NHL affiliate Anaheim has done all the signings here, just a bunch of either 1 or 2 year contracts, 2-way. And so, yeah, I mean, bringing back Sam Carrick, bringing back Christian Hughes from the Hershey Bears trade from last season. And yeah, just another instance of NHL teams preparing for A, like you said, the Seattle expansion draft, and B, those expanded taxi squads that they may or may not have gotten wind of as the season, or the off season rather, was chugging along. So
I'd be surprised to see Juice in San Diego at any point. I think he is, even if there weren't taxi squads, I think he probably makes the Ducks, as their defensive roster is not that good from memory. And Juice is certainly good enough to make the bottom pair of an NHL roster, in my opinion. I was surprised that the Capitals let him go. I thought he was going to end up being their number 5, number 6 defenseman in Washington. And given that Anaheim is bad, I think he definitely can sneak in a spot there. So otherwise we'd be talking about Christian Juice, but I don't think he plays in San Diego this year. So that's why we're not talking about him.
That's fair. Hey, that's fair. I knew the Hershey connection was there, so I figured I would at least throw his name out there for you.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, we got the goals covered, and now we're going to be bumping over to the Stockton Heat, the AHL affiliate of the Calgary Flames. And I'm really excited to bring back on. She has actually been on In the Corners when it was still an ECHL podcast. Gosh, it feels like 100 years ago, but it was probably about 1.5 years, 2 years ago now. But she has covered the Kansas City Mavericks for the Sin Bin, and she jumped in and is now a contributor for Fansided. I'm talking about the Calgary Flames with them, but she is now back at the Sin Bin covering the AHL's Stockton Heat. And if somebody knows the Calgary Flames prospects, it's going to be Ms. Paige Seward. So, Paige, welcome to the show.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, of course.
Like I said, I've hyped you up. Are you ready to talk some Calgary Flames prospects here?
Yes, let's go for it.
All right. Sounds like a plan. First and foremost, Glenn, is it Godin?
Yeah, Godin.
Okay. Godin. Okay. Signed October 14th, 2 seasons with Stockton previously, so not a stranger to the organization. 53 games played in 1920, 4.68 point shares. That's good enough for the 92nd percentile on a per game basis and a first line grade for Mr. Sean O'Brien's analytical model. What he lacks in flash, he makes up for in effectiveness. That's how I describe Godden's game. He's got good vision. He processes the game quickly. He's got that paired with above average puck skills. His defensive game is sound as well. But his biggest problem, I think, has always been his skating. It's progressed to be passable, but it's still, unfortunately, it's still his weakest hockey ability. It is what it is. Godden still should be in the mix for a call up to Calgary, if not in this shortened, bizarre season, then in 21-22 for sure. But again, taxi squads, all bets are off. Paige, what have you got to say about Mr. Godden?
This is a guy you hear about a lot of the time when you're looking into Calgary media, especially. I follow a lot of insiders kind of throughout the organizations, and I think Godden's one of those guys that they really want to see succeed. He does a good job at the AHL, and he just, like you said, the skating thing is what needs to change to bring him up to the NHL. I noticed there was back in October, he was telling some of the Flames media when he got re-signed that he wants to make the team. So when he comes to training camp, he's going to be wanting to be on that taxi squad this year. So if he's not, he's going to bring that grit to the AHL. So he's a guy everyone wants to see. We want to see him succeed. We want to see him be with the Flames, but if not, being successful with Stockton. I know all the time I'll see, "Oh my Godden" is the caption that they'll use on Twitter all the time. So they're really a guy that everyone's rooting for and they want to see more of. So I really hope he has a lot coming this season, because I know he definitely wants to be up there with the team. So fingers crossed, let's go.
There you go.
I feel like he's a prospect too, that like he's still young, but I feel like I've heard him be talked about as like this up and coming Calgary guy for what feels like a decade now. Even though he's 24, I think. He just seems like he has always been someone that they have been pumping the tires of, and with good cause. Like, he has legitimate NHL skills and his skating has improved. It's not like he's never going to be, dusting Connor McDavid in the All-Star competition, but like his skating has gotten to a point where he can be an effective NHL player. I don't know if he makes the taxi squad simply because of, in my opinion, I think the taxi squad is going to be more like, it's not going to be for your guys who are still developing or prospects. They're going to want those guys getting top 6 minutes in the AHL, whereas I think those taxi squads are going to be made up of guys who, it's like, if they're sitting in the press box for 20 straight games, aren't going to lose sleep over it. And I don't think that's a good place for Godden, but we'll see. It's going to be an adventure in how these taxi squads are made up. And if you're playing the In the Corners drinking game, I'm sure you're probably gone by now for how many times I've said taxi squad.
Yeah. Fill out your In the Corners bingo card. Taxi squad probably has like 10 punches right now.
That's the free space. It's got it.
That is the free space this episode. Yeah, absolutely. All right. From a forward and Godden to a defenseman, and Alex Petrovich signed October 9th. Last season, he played with Providence. Sean, sorry, I didn't mean to step on your toes there.
No worries. 54 games played in 1920, 2.38 point shares, good for the 51st percentile on a per game basis, and a second pair grade from the model. I could see Petrovich as a taxi squad player. He played the 1920 season in the A, so it's very possible he's in Stockton for whatever season happens. But Petrovich is a gigantic physical defensive defenseman. He's not someone who has the puck skills or skating you'd expect from a guy with 263 NHL games, but he's good in his own zone, albeit he chases hits a little too often. But once the puck leaves the D zone, he's not really much of a contributor to his team. Doesn't really join the rush, doesn't leave the blue line too much in the O zone, doesn't really contribute to offense that much. But in the defensive zone, he's a guy who's a battler. He's a big physical presence. He's good in front of the net. But I think he's going to be someone you want to pair with a little bit more of a wild card defensive partner, someone who's going to skate and join the rush and do those things, knowing that Petro is just going to stay back there and do his thing.
Yeah, I definitely find with the Flames organization, they like having these short-term deals with kind of veteran players. So especially a player like him who's had the NHL experience, they know he can do it if he needs to. So they can kind of slide him into the lineup whenever needed. I do agree with you. I'm not 100% sure we're going to see him in Stockton at all this year, because when I first heard the signing, I kind of assumed he would kind of be the guy that'd be flip-flopping within the lineup. But you never know. There are a lot of defensemen that you're kind of looking at with question marks over your head because you're not sure where they're going to slide into into the lineup. There's also Valimaki. You don't know if he's 100% or if they're going to play him this year, if they want to develop him in Stockton with the shortened season and everything. So there is holes in the defensive area. It's just with this one, I feel like that's definitely one that you would probably, like you said, the taxi squad, we're going to say it a million times today, but that might be kind of the spot for him for sure.
I mean, I thought he was when Boston signed him last year. I'm like, okay, that's their number 7 defenseman. And then he spent the entire year in Providence. So I'm like, well, maybe that's what Stockton and Calgary planned for him, but we're going to see. I think there's at least a chance. So I wanted to make sure we at least talked about him just in case that's how it plays out. But Cece, talk to me about Byron Froese.
Oh, Byron Froese, solid forward, 46 games played. He re-signed on October 9th. You know, that seems to be the sweet spot around the 9th, 10th there for a lot of signings at the AHL level. Again, 46 games played in 1920, 4.2 point shares. That's good for the 92nd percentile on a per game basis. First line grade from the model, of course. He's a do-it-all veteran center who has received numerous compliments on his leadership from teammates and coaches. Froese won't wow you with his puck skills or skating, but his ability to read and process the game in all 3 zones are strong, and that's the core of his game. Those skills last and will keep his game aging well as he turns 30 this spring. He could be a taxi squad guy. Take a drink. But I think he brings more value as a veteran in the AHL this upcoming season. Your thoughts, Paige?
Yeah, I think he's probably one of the ones you're going to want to keep in Stockton. With him being the captain last year as well, too, you don't want to ruffle up the leadership that much, especially with the type of year we've been having and kind of the not sure what the season's going to look like if we get another huge wave of COVID or we get some of those second strings coming along. We don't know if we're going to get a full season with playoffs and everything, especially in kind of the semi-pro levels. So this is a guy you're probably going to want to keep around the team. Either way, whatever team he ends up on, he's going to have a lot of respect in that locker room. He's going to be a guy that fits in really well. So I would like to see him back in Stockton. I'm assuming they would probably keep him as the captain of the team. I don't think there's any contenders there and any reason not to. So I think he'd be a good guy to make sure that the guys that aren't on the taxi squad are still developing and preparing for future years when they possibly get their chance at a hopeful normal NHL season.
Yeah. And Paige, just while you were talking, it dawned on me that I think you're the only guest that we've had in these division previews where you have an NHL team that's based in Canada. And well, aside from Utica, with Cody Severson, but we have a much clearer picture than we did when we were talking about Utica about how these taxi squads are going to operate, and that, you know, Stockton, Utica, and Bakersfield are all going to stay in the United States to play in the theoretical AHL season. But Calgary, you know, those taxi squad guys, they're going to need to be in Canada for that Canadian NHL division for sure. And so to keep a guy like Byron Froese down in Stockton, you know, I mean, like I said, that just popped in my head. And I think I agree with you. I think that's a great idea because you're going to need that leadership because prospects are not going to be easily coming from Stockton like they were in years past. So yeah, definitely. And now with the whole Canadian division, the premise behind it is because in Canada, we have to have the 14-day quarantine. So if you take the captain away for 14 days and you keep him there for a couple more games, say there's an injury, whatever's going on, you can easily waste a month on a guy who doesn't even touch the ice. So it's the whole Canadian division it's there for a reason, and it's there because of COVID, unfortunately, but it makes travel very hard between some of the affiliations as well. Yeah, absolutely. Sean, tell us a little bit about Buddy Robinson. What a name.
45 games played in 1920, 3.74 point shares, good for the 90th percentile on a per game basis and a first line grade from the model. Actual name is Charles James Robinson, but Buddy is a family nickname. He's a good cook and one of Johnny Gaudreau's childhood friends. On the ice, he's got good puck skills from the AHL, and his skating could use some refining. He has burst, but his edge work in my viewings was a little questionable at times last season. His game overall is very much a 200-foot game. And while I always will love a forward who excels in his D zone, there were a number of times in which I felt like he was almost too defensively minded, where I felt like his play could have generated more offensive zone chances, but he didn't want to run the risk of being caught in transition. Part of me wonders if that's his own confidence in his own skating or just simply not wanting to get caught, you know, being a little more offensive.
Yeah, he's another guy too that throughout the Flames organization you hear about a lot, probably just as much or as Glenn Godden. He's another guy they really want to succeed, and he did play in the last bubble game of the playoffs last year, and he was a guy that they need to bring in, that they just need to switch it up with the lineup. Like, whatever they were doing wasn't working. They didn't have Matthew Tkachuk. They're like, we need a big guy. Buddy Robinson is 6'6". He's a big guy. You're going to notice him on the ice. And with the third and fourth line, they do get a little bit more gritty, so you don't exactly have to be a quick skater. You can be a bigger guy that's pushing people around, roughing them up. But with him, I do kind of understand where you're coming from there for sure. But yeah, another guy, it's kind of a question mark where he'll end up. He's going to be one that they want to definitely develop. But do they think he's on the cusp of being with the squad for this year? So I honestly, I would like to see him in Stockton just for his own personal benefit, to kind of develop as a player and hopefully come out strong for a full season, so he can kind of have the option to go between teams. I don't think the taxi squad would be a good idea for him this year, but if he is there, he would definitely rise to the challenge. Obviously, he is in the back of their minds if he's already getting some NHL time, especially last year. So we'll see what happens with him. He's kind of a question mark for me, so we'll see what happens.
If it were me and I were in charge and I were Brad Treliving of divvying up these rosters, he's someone that if we had a really good skating coach or a top developmental coach that could get his skating, then that could work with him on the practice squad for every couple of days, making sure to get him some skating work. That would be, I think, the only reason that I would bring him to the taxi squad. Otherwise, I think he's someone who needs to get out there and play in order to really see him making strides. And if he's on the taxi squad, I think he's going to be a guy that sits a lot, except for maybe some of those, Calgary and Edmonton played 10 times this year. Those games are going to have penalty minutes. So having a dude who is 6'6", that's physical, that might not be terrible to have in your back pocket, because I'm sure the last 4 of those games are just going to be wars, especially when Matthew Tkachuk is on one of the sides. So I think I would prefer to see him in Stockton as well, just from a growth perspective, but I could see both sides of that.
Well, yeah, there are 10 Battle of Albertas this year, but also we saw last year that Lucic doesn't get in on them. So we were all expecting Lucic to come in and rough everyone up, but that's his former team. So you still need a big guy that's going to push him around when Draisaitl's coming for everybody or Cassian's coming for everybody. You do need a big guy, but you also need a big guy that's willing to kind of push it back as well, whereas Lucic is kind of a little bit jaded on which side he's on for that. So I could definitely see him being a good part of that type of battle, because I'm already starting to book off all those days that they're playing, because that is going to be some of the best hockey to see this year. So it would be cool if he would be a part of it too.
I was very sad last season when Matthew Tkachuk was that he said that he regretted some of the stuff that he said during that confrontation. No, don't ever regret things, Matthew Tkachuk.
Yeah.
And Sean, Paige and I previously covered the Mountain Division and the ECHL. You want to talk about teams playing each other, 10, 12, 15 times, especially like an Idaho and a Utah, or Kansas City with Tulsa and Allen. It's like you make enemies. If you're not enemies already, you make enemies really quick when you play each other that many times in a season. And on the AHL and the EC, or the NHL and the NHL, AHL and NHL level, too many acronyms. I can't handle it. On those levels, you don't have it as much, but this year is different. So it's going to be great. It's going to be phenomenal. But that ends our time with Stockton. But Paige, I did want to keep you on because we are segueing into Bakersfield, and the first person that we're going to be talking about, you are very familiar with. So let's talk about Mr. Alan Quine a little. He signed with Bakersfield on October 9th after previously spending 2 seasons in Stockton, 38 games played in 1920, 4.98 point shares, good for the 98th percentile on a per game basis. Obviously a top grade for an AHL forward in the model. Quine has emerged as a dangerous forward in the AHL thanks to mostly his fluid skating and very good puck skills. He is very smooth with the puck, and he's got good playmaking vision in the O zone and in transition as well. He's a very good, like I said, while he's a very good skater, he lacks that top speed, I think, that keeps him from being an everyday NHLer. Regardless, he's a top line forward in the AHL. He's a solid get for Bakersfield. Like I said, staying in the division, hopping over from Stockton over to Bakersfield, California. Paige, last but not least, Alan Quine.
Yeah, this was one I was really sad to see go. I kind of had to read that a few times when I looked at the transactions on kind of signing day and stuff to see that we'd released him from Calgary, because he's one of those guys that even at an NHL level, whenever they called him up, he could fit right into the lineup. And it was like he didn't even blink an eye. He was kind of one of those guys you feel like was always there, kind of. Sorry to go back to Stockton, but Zach Ronaldo as well. You felt like he was on the team all year. So those two guys, they were the ones that were popping into the lineup. They were in the press box if needed. He's a really good playmaker. He has really good line chemistry with whoever he ends up working with. So whichever team he ends up with is going to be a good fit for him, because they got a good one out of him for sure. So definitely want to keep up with him, because I'm going to miss him seeing him with the Flaming Sea. But he is a great player, and I don't think being released from Calgary isn't a negative thing in his way. He definitely has the opportunity to develop as a player now and possibly get some more NHL experience in the upcoming seasons as well.
And I don't wonder if that wasn't part of the equation for him. Is he'd been in Stockton for 2 seasons. He had gotten call-ups, but even though it seemed like he was doing well in those call-ups, he never manages to stick it with them. Whereas you go to Bakersfield, and I mean, Edmonton's been icing AHL players in their lineup for years now. So like his chances of cracking that lineup and maybe getting to play with McDavid, Nugent Hopkins, Leon Draisaitl, like that's got to be a very tempting thing, even though you're, now going to share a locker room with guys you punched in the face last year.
Right.
Well, and Sean, I think with a guy like a Kyler Yamamoto and his success and his, moving on from Bakersfield and onto the Edmonton roster, I think that gives, a little bit of hope for Quine as well, and obviously there's still going to be, whether at the AHL level in the Pacific Division rivalry or at the NHL level with this long-standing Battle of Alberta. I think wherever he's put, he's going to succeed well. And, whether on the Bakersfield level or at the Edmonton level. So speaking of Bakersfield, we'll continue with the Condors shortly. I did want to say, Paige, again, it's been a pleasure to work with you again at the Sin Bin. As you know, I'm going to be moving on. But like I also told you before, I don't think this is the last time our paths are going to cross.
Doubt it.
Yeah, exactly. We keep running into each other. It's just going to keep happening. You're a great correspondent. Really enjoy your work and what you do. Where can people find your written work? I know I mentioned Fanside and everything, but give us some URLs, give us some websites.
So for Stockton stuff, that will be Sin Bin, and then I'm running the Sin Bin Heat account. And then for more of the fan-sided stuff, I write for Puck Pros. So puckpros.com in the Calgary Flames section, that's where you'll find the majority of my work. And then I kind of have a few Twitter accounts that are kind of working with each other. I have Flames Prospect Update, and then also Flames-sided as well. I'm working on getting a little bit more active on those, but without any hockey going on, it's tough. But those are kind of some areas you can find. I usually share my work on all the platforms. So if you're interested in Calgary or Stockton or both, you're more likely to find those on those accounts for sure.
Well, Paige, yeah, that'll be, like I said, I'll keep tabs on you for sure. And everyone else who's listening, go check out her work. Like I said, she's a wonderful correspondent, great reporter, just as eloquent in her writing as she is in her speaking. Paige Seward, thank you for joining us tonight, Paige.
Thanks, guys. Best of luck.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Happy hockey
Bye.
season. Bye.
See you.
All right. Well, hey, yeah, we keep running across each other. It's just how it is. When you're a good correspondent, good writer, good podcaster, it's bound to happen. All right. So Bakersfield. Yes. Let's go with number 2, goaltender Anton Forsberg. Take it away, Shawnee.
27 games played in Anton Forsberg in Charlotte last year. He signed on October 9th. He had 0.16 goalie point shares per 60 minutes last year and a negative 0.045 goals saved above average per 60 minutes. That really killed his percentile ranking. He fell to the 7th percentile and got a backup grade. 1920 was not kind to Anton Forsberg.
Ouch.
In my viewings of him, his aggressiveness in coming way out of the paint to challenge shooters has calmed down a bit, but he's still way more one of the way more aggressive goaltenders in the AHL. He's athletic, but he definitely struggles to consistently have good mechanics game in and game out. And he lets up a lot of goals through his 5-hole and low corners and like armpit areas. And I think that's because of mechanics. There are definitely some times in which that athleticism is shown through well, and he makes a lot of stellar saves. But I think overall, Anton Forsberg didn't mesh very well with the Charlotte system, as there were definitely a few times in which it seemed like the chances that that Charlotte gave up were not meshed well with Forsberg's skill set and reading. He had a lot of rush chances that he had to deal with, and I don't think he's a very good rush goaltender, but I do think he's a lot better than the 7th percentile of goalkeeping in the AHL. He's had good seasons in the past, but it seems like his mechanics issues and relying a lot on being aggressive and challenging shooters definitely can come back to bite him. There are also some times where he would make just enormous gaffes playing the puck. I believe I watched one game against Utica where he went to play the puck behind the net, and within the span of about 5 minutes, his puck playing directly led to 2 goals.
Yikes. Wow. See, and here's a guy that I thought was going to be, at least part of the Chicago Blackhawks system just a couple of seasons ago, at least, at least a little bit, between Chicago and Rockford there. But I mean, ever since that standout season that he had in 14-15 with Springfield, 28-1, 2.01 goals against average, 0.927 save percentage. He just has kind of fallen off since then. And he just really struggled to get his footing.
He had a really good year in Cleveland. I believe he was the one that carried them to a Calder Cup, if I'm not mistaken. But
17-18, I'll have to check on that. Yeah, let me see.
I'd have to look, but I know that he is very much someone who, when he's on, but he doesn't give you that consistency that you want. Especially last year, there were a lot, he had a couple good stretches, but he had a couple really bad stretches too. He's very much the opposite of a goaltender we're going to talk about later in Grosnick.
Lake Erie. That's what threw me for a loop. He was with Lake Erie back in 15-16, and 23-10-5 during the regular season, and they did end up winning the Calder Cup. So I remember he was a big part of that. He was stand on his head making saves, shut out every night good. Oh yeah, hot goaltenders can't be downplayed in the postseason by any means, for sure.
Absolutely not.
From Forsberg to William Lagesson, defenseman was re-signed on November 4th. He's currently playing in the Swedish Hockey League on that tier 1 level, top level. 25 games played in 1920, 1.36 point shares. That's good for the 63rd percentile on a per game basis, and a second pair grade from the model. He is a smart defender who can move the puck, but his best asset, I think, is in his D zone play rather. He gets a stick in passing lanes and he's physical. He's capable of winning battles in front and along the boards. I doubt he's ever going to be a top tier skater, but it has improved to the point where I don't think it holds him back. He has good but not great puck skills that are efficient, but also not flashy. He doesn't get too cute with it, like I said earlier. So, yeah.
He's someone who that I want to mention. He reminds me of Chris Pronger in the sense that he is mean. He is a tough guy to play against. He is not someone that you want to have to battle against night in and night out when you have to play, like you said, the same team several times. He definitely brings that just difficult to play against, and is just mean in the corners and in front of the net. Otherwise that's pretty much nail on the head.
Cool. Last but not least for the we're still on the Condors. Sorry, I'm getting a little brain fog here. Centerman Seth Griffith.
Griffith signed October 9th after 2 years in Manitoba, 58 games played in 1920, 3.86 point shares, good for the 81st percentile on a per game basis, and just sneaking into the first line grade in the model. Very much an offensive first forward. Griffith has very good playmaking vision and excellent puck skills that have that NHL caliber smoothness to them. He's a good shooter, but I think his shooting percentage comes back to earth after shooting almost 23% last season. I don't believe that's sustainable given his shooting ability. My main area of concern for him is his skating. He's not slow, but his stride is really inefficient and choppy. In watching him, it seemed like he had to take 7-8 strides to go the same distance someone else would, making 2 or 3. He looks like he's just working a lot harder to go half as far when he skates. regardless, I think he has the talent to be a top-line player in Bakersfield. That those NHL caliber puck skills should be exciting for Condors fans to see. And I think that's definitely going to be something that Bakersfield gets out of him.
Yeah, I mean, as a first-line grade, 81st percentile and everything, once again, the stats speak for themselves, and the proof is in the figures in a lot of instances. But when you've got such, wonky mechanics in regards to your strides and everything like that, I think that really is going to be detrimental in taking you from the AHL level up to the NHL level. I mean, obviously there's also, like you said, the shooting percentage, there's got to be a leveling out point for sure. I mean, there's always that case of personal PDO, if that's a thing, and puck luck.
Oh yeah.
But yeah. So yeah, there's obviously going to be a comeback down to earth season probably coming up for Griffith.
I would expect so, but I wouldn't expect him to fall off the map. Like, I would still expect him to be around the 80th percentile when we talk about his numbers at the end of the season. I wouldn't expect him to fall off the map, but skating ability is what keeps most guys out of the NHL and in the AHL. That they have the puck skills, they see the game well, they process it well, but they can't skate. And unfortunately, in the NHL, the game has gone the direction where if you can't, skate at the NHL level, you cannot play, because there is a guy on every team who will put you on SportsCenter's, top 10 plays on the wrong end.
Right. Yep. Couldn't agree more myself. Skating's important.
Yep.
All right. 3 teams to go. First up, Ontario Reign. Let's talk about right winger Matt Luff. He re-signed on October 5th. 30 games played in 1920. 2.33 point share, good for the 87th percentile on a per game basis, and a first line grade from the analytic model. Point blank, Luff probably shouldn't be in the AHL. However, the King system is stacked with talent and dripping with potential, and I think a few guys are going to cut Luff in line, so to speak. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that Luff is very good. His skating isn't the strongest, like we talked about, previously with Griffith, but it is certainly good enough. He's got NHL caliber shot, an NHL caliber shot, and he has the vision and instincts that have him finding open ice in places he shouldn't. He also developed great chemistry with Blaine Byron and Jared Anderson-Dolan. If he ends up in Ontario and not LA this upcoming season, Reign fans will certainly enjoy him. Obviously, they don't have a situation like Calgary and Stockton where prospects can't really shift back and forth as easily. So,
yep. As South Park has taught me, we should always blame Canada. But I also want to point out Matt Luff, probably the best TikTok in the AHL currently. It's very fun.
Really?
Yes.
Does he dance?
He does.
Okay.
But he should not, which is what makes it fun.
That's always good. I'll have to check that out after the episode for sure.
Yep.
Like we mentioned with Scott, Mark Alt, defenseman, signing with the LA Kings organization on October 10th. 2 years in Colorado, and he's got 5-ish seasons between the Philadelphia Flyers and Lehigh Valley Phantoms before that. Sean, I kind of wanted to get your take on Alt a little bit. I mean, like I said, fans know, Scott and I's take on it, but want to hear what you got to say about Mr. Alt a little bit.
All right, analytics first. 55 games played in 1920, 3.2 point shares, good for the 67th percentile on a per game basis and a second pair grade from the model. One thing that did stand out to me is he is incredibly conservative with the puck, opting a lot of times for glassing out or short support passes than anything further down the ice. He's someone I imagine doesn't drink milk if the expiration date is 2 days away. That's how conservative he was with the puck. This leads him to not making bad turnovers too often, but it also means that he stays off the score sheet and isn't a serious asset in transition. And that's kind of a balance. I think there were definitely moments in which he could have been riskier without really, or I shouldn't say riskier. He could have not been as conservative, come off the blue line and join the cycle, take some strides to join the rush, maybe, make a pass that crosses 2 lines. Like, that would have been something I felt like he could have done in more instances last season, but just chose to simply be safe, make the safe play. He did wear the C in Colorado last year. So in that sense, he's going to bring some of those leadership qualities to what is likely going to be a very young Ontario Reign team. So I think that is a big factor for them. CC, I'm not someone who follows the Eagles quite to the extent that you do. So it's hard for me to say, oh, he wore the C, definitely a leader, because I think there are a lot of leaders in the locker room who don't have letters on their names, and the guys who end up with the C aren't always the leader behind the scenes. In a lot of cases, I think in the NHL especially, there's the instance of best player on the team has to have the C or an A at least, where he's not necessarily the spoken leader in the locker room.
Yeah, and I think with Alt that he was deserved of the C, of the captaincy, because in the few games that I covered last season for the Eagles, one of them was Faith and Family Night, and he was the guy on the ice after the game, leading the prayer, talking with people and things like that. And I think that's super important when you can see a guy both on the ice and off the ice, not only interacting with his team but also with the fans. And I think at the AHL level, you can maybe put a little more stock into it than you can on the NHL level. Possibly, I'll just take a step out and say that AHL and ECHL level, minor league hockey teams, you have to connect with your fan base. You have to connect with your community. I don't want to say a whole lot more, but I think you have to put more of an emphasis on it because you want to continue to put down roots and stabilize your market. And just be part of the community, be a positive force in the community. And I think Mark Alt did that, and he is going to bring that to the Ontario Reign locker room. I think the writing was on the wall. I mean, when the Avs didn't bring him into the bubble, I mean, they brought a number of other guys, like Logan O'Connor and Connor Timmins and even Hunter Miska, but Alt was nowhere to be seen. So I think it was kind of like, all right, time to move on. And that's why he signed the contract with the Kings like he did.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Another guy that I wanted to bring up, but I also want you to talk about him a little bit. Just a fantastic season last year, 3 seasons total with Milwaukee, but goaltender Troy Grosenick signed with the Reign, the Kings organization, on October 10th. And I definitely want to hear what you got to say about him too. So little unorthodox 2 in a row for Mr. Sean O'Brien. Yeah.
33 games played in 1920, 0.25 point shares per 60 minutes, 0.406 goals saved above average per 60 minutes, good enough for the 82nd percentile in a starter rating. This is one of the times in which I will disagree with how my model rated players and say Grosenick is better than the 82nd percentile. But then again, that fits very much into what I'm about to say. John Gibson is the Rodney Dangerfield of NHL goalies, the Anaheim Ducks goaltender. He gets no respect. Troy Grosenick very well could be the Rodney Dangerfield of AHL goalies. Even my model does not give him the proper amount of respect that I feel like he has deserved. 2 straight seasons in Milwaukee, he's been very good for them, and more importantly, he's been consistent. His mechanics are solid. He moves very fluidly, reads the play well. If I had to find a weakness with him, I'd say it's making saves on rush chances. I think the few times I did get to see him give up some maybe not great goals, he was expecting a pass and lost his angle on shooters on the rush. But even I'll admit that's really nitpicky. What stands out to me, though, is if you look at him on a game-by-game basis, he comes to play every single game. He had one of, going off these statistics that on the forecheck actually uses for the Milwaukee Admirals, which is quality start percentage. It's the percentage of starts that a goaltender has that he records over a league average save percentage.
Okay.
Grosenick had one of the highest across 2 seasons because every game he's bringing the goods. He's given that team a chance to win.
Well, and him and Connor Ingram for Milwaukee last season, they won the goaltending award, correct? For the regular season, I believe, for the best goals against average for the league.
I don't remember off the top of my head because it feels like league awards were 20 years ago. So
that's because they were in 2020 time. They were 20 years ago. So,
and I believe we even covered the awards in a previous episode, and that couldn't have been that many episodes because I was here for it, and it still feels like forever ago. But I know Grosenick definitely was someone who, I believe it was 18-19. I felt like he got snubbed for goaltender of the year.
Yeah, it was the Harry Hap Holmes Memorial Award, awarded annually to the goaltenders of the AHL with the lowest goals against average. Grosenick and Ingram for the Milwaukee Admirals in 1920 got that award. So My memory served me correctly. Hot diggity damn.
I was thinking you were talking about the Bastion that Capo Kakkonen won.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that's the different goalie award. Yeah.
Different goalie award, yes. So, but like you said, it feels like 20 years ago. Random side note I forgot to mention with Mark Alt. I know you'll appreciate this, Sean. His dad, John Alt, played for the Kansas City Chiefs. He was a left tackle for the Kansas City Chiefs. And he was no slouch. He played in 3 Pro Bowls from 1984 to 1996. And he has his name in the Chiefs Ring of Fame.
That's pretty awesome, actually.
I know. Yeah, right. I mean, I found that out when one of the guys from Colorado State was interviewing Mark Alt after the Chiefs won the Super Bowl, and he asked him, "Hey, how do you feel about it?" He's like, "Well, of course, I grew up there. I'm a Chiefs fan, of course." And in Colorado and Denver country, probably not the most popular thing to say, but
Yeah.
If looks could kill, big oof moment. But anyway, let's finish up the Ontario Reign and the Los Angeles Kings organization. Like I said, a lot of two-way contracts here. Carl Grundstrom, right winger, re-signed on September 1st. 40 games played in 1920, 2.58 point share. That is good for the 80th percentile on a per game basis and a second line grade from the model. He didn't quite have the big forward stepping year in 1920 that I was anticipating. But nonetheless, he's a fun player to watch. Because of his top end skating and good vision. I mean, that it's always fun to see that when you got a player with that combo rather on the ice, top end skating, good vision. He competes hard in all 3 zones as well. I do question how much of his offense translates to the NHL level. But for now, he's someone I expect to be a quality top 6 forward for the Reign this season. I think it's a good choice to bring him back to the Kings organization and to the Reign. Lord willing and the creek don't rise for 2020-21.
I think too, even if he was on the Kings short list for call-ups, I think he's about to get cut in line from a lot of their prospects that are going to be graduating from juniors and who are probably even going to cut the line in the AHL completely. Guys like Akil Thomas, I know that he signed. I don't know what their plans are for him, but he is a second rounder for the Kings from, I believe, not this most recent draft, but the one before that. Just to finish up his junior career, I believe, and he's probably going to be in Ontario, but I'm not positive. But again, he wasn't a recent signee, so that's why we didn't include him. But he's someone, obviously a lot of their other high draft picks. I think if Grundstrom or Luff, as we talked about, were eyeing up a call up, I think they're about to get cut in line quite a few times, unfortunately.
Yeah, and the fact that just looking at their transaction sheet here, it's like they are signing a lot of guys to those entry level deals. And obviously, a guy like a Quentin Byfield, obviously he may have a little more seasoning in the OHL. He's not going to come up, but like other guys that were re-signed earlier in the offseason, guys like a Tyler Madden or, Arthur Kalviev, it's just, like you said, you've got all of these people nipping at the heels in the organization. They've got a lot of prospects, and there's only so many roster spots on both the Kings and the Reign. So yeah, it's going to be, just kind of a show me what you got sort of thing.
And I think a lot of those guys too, when I say cut the line, like they're, with the exception of Byfield, I don't know if Byfield is NHL ready. I don't think he goes to the AHL for anything more than a cup of coffee, maybe kind of like what Kotkaniemi did earlier this past season. Just down for a cup of coffee, do a little bit of work down there, and then he's back up and he stays there. Whereas a lot of the other guys you mentioned, Kaliev, Thomas, etc., I think those are guys that are going to see some longer tours of duty in the AHL, probably at least a full or most of a full season, and then they're going to be up with the Kings.
Yeah, and it's the fact that they were so adamant after the season was postponed and eventually canceled to sign those guys. Like, you look at that early transaction list, it's like boom, boom, boom. Like 4 or 5 of the 6 or 7 transactions since that March date were entry-level contracts. Like, they just wanted to lock those guys up and eliminate that uncertainty so that, now that we're further down the road, they've got their rights and they can play them. So whether at the AHL or NHL level.
I think that's going to do it for us for Ontario at this point. We are going to be moving on to Henderson.
Yes, sir.
The latest and greatest AHL town. And we're going to talk about Gage Quinney, left winger who re-signed October 7th. 46 games played in 1920, 4.24 point shares, good for the 92nd percentile on a per game basis, and a first line grade from the model. Good puck skills and a good shooter who honestly I think should shoot a little more. He's a quality guy from the half wall in the power play. His edge work is good, but he lacks burst and that top gear that would really separate him from his peers in the AHL, especially given what are very polished puck skills. Quine is more of a finesse player and not really keen on going and battling in the corners in the front of the net. But he took a big step forward last season and looked like a guy who will be challenging for call-ups to, at the very least, be a top AHL forward again, probably in that upper 90 percentile range.
Yeah, and Henderson definitely has the the benefit that Ontario does, of course, and a lot of California NHL and AHL affiliations, and the fact that the proximity is close. So if you need a call up, you go down to the Orleans Arena or the Lifeguard Arena where they're playing, they're practicing and everything, and yeah, you just pluck them up right there. So they have that benefit too. Definitely not a Calgary, Stockton situation or a Bakersfield, Edmonton situation by any means. So moving on, let's talk about defenseman Jimmy Schuldt, re-signed on October 8th. 52 games played in 1920, 3.49 point share. That's good for the 76th percentile on a per game basis and a first pair grade from the model. Pretty good rookie campaign from the Hobey Baker finalist, Jimmy Schuldt. He's good under pressure. He's got good puck skills and skating. He has good instincts and is aggressive in the neutral zone, willing to step up and kill rush chances before they materialize, which again, always good for a defenseman to do. I do think that there were times last season that he was timid and didn't want to maybe take some chances in the O zone that he could have or should have. But still, I think he's a good defenseman that could step up big this season. And if given the opportunity and the ice time, I mean, it was kind of a big deal when his signing was announced, for at least what I remember. So, coming in from the collegiate level, and in St. Cloud State, he did play a season with the Chicago Wolves. I did space that, I had a bit of a brain fart there, but yeah, he'll be great coming into the Henderson Silver Knights now under the Vegas banner.
Yep. And next up on our list is a guy who I feel like I have been watching for a very, very long time, Thomas Yershow. Signed October 10th, was as a free agent from Bakersfield last season. Only 8 games played in 1920, 0.72 point shares. He does not get a percentile ranking or depth chart grade because 8 games does not meet the minimum cutoff. But Yershow is a smooth skater, but doesn't have that elite speed. But he still has some of the smoothest puck skills in the game paired with pretty good playmaking vision. Yershow is someone who's not going to be in the dirty areas fighting for the puck too often or ever be considered a defensive hero, but he is still very dangerous with the puck on his stick, and he can make just about any AHL defender look bad.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, you said, like you said, you feel like you've been watching him forever. You look at his lengthy. I mean, he's had a good solid career in regards to just where he's been and how long he's played. His first season was 2012-13 with Rapid. I was about to say Rapid City. There goes my ECHL colors showing a little bit. Grand Rapids Griffins in the AHL, bouncing back and forth between Detroit, coming on to the Chicago Blackhawks organization in 2016, bouncing back and forth between Rockford, played in Springfield and Charlotte in 18-19, and then of course Bakersfield in 1920 and Edmonton, just a back and forth, going from the AHL to the NHL as kind of that fringe player. Do you see that? Do you see him breaking through to Vegas next season?
Maybe. He strikes me as a prime taxi squad candidate just because he's a veteran. He's a known quantity. My only thing is I would not like when I think of taxi squad guys, I'm thinking of guys you can put in the fourth line, the bottom six that will, play defensively responsible minutes and won't, cost you a game. And while Yurko, I don't think is someone who's ever going to cost. Yurko is not someone who's going to cost you a game. He is definitely not defensive minded nor a stalwarts grinder that you would put on the third or fourth line. He's someone who very much wants the puck on his stick and wants to make moves with it and wants to make people look stupid with the puck on his stick. So in that sense, I could see him sticking it in Henderson for the year. But how Vegas chooses to do their taxi squad is going to be an interesting experiment for sure. But I could see him getting in a normal, 82 game fans in the building kind of season for Henderson in Las Vegas. I could definitely see him, taking some veteran call ups and gaining, a handful, maybe 15 games with Vegas. But this year, I think he's either going to be taxi squad and make a couple of, cameos in Vegas, or he's going to spend the year in the AHL.
Fair enough. Yeah, I thank you for elaborating on that. I'm glad you expanded. Here I am just throwing it out there kind of on the fly. We didn't even plan that. And, I shouldn't be too surprised Sean gave such a quality answer. But, well, of course. Last but not least, Danny O'Regan signed on October 11th. 5 seasons between Hartford, Rochester. I was about to say Rockford, but I knew that wasn't right. Hartford, Rochester, and the San Jose Barracuda. 62 games played in 1920. 3-point shares on the dot. That's good for the 66th percentile on a per game basis and a second line grade from the model. He's a pretty good skater who utilizes linear crossovers well to build speed through the neutral zone with the puck. His puck skills are average. His ability to make a clean pass reception and efforts in puck protection are areas that, do need work. His playmaking vision currently is the strongest part of his game from what I've noticed. He's a good signing for them as a second line center for sure.
Yeah, not someone who I would be trusting to drive play at a top line, but definitely someone who I think is a good secondary depth scorer.
Short and sweet.
Yeah.
Sorry, you had me. I was waiting with bated breath to see if you were going to elaborate like Yurko, but
no, that you pretty much summed it up as well as I could. Like that is definitely him in a nutshell.
No, this is him in a nutshell. Help! I'm in a nutshell, and I can't get out. Okay, that was bad. Invoking Austin Powers there. Oh, what a dated reference. We're getting old. Anyway, last but not least, the eighth and final team in the Pacific Division, the 31st team that we have previewed for signings and re-signings in this AHL offseason. Of course, like Sean has alluded to in past episodes, we will get to team capsules and previews as the season draws near. But our final guest for this division previews and our final guest for the In the Corners podcast. Stay tuned again. Once again, the tease for the new endeavor coming up after we talk to Kevin. Now, Kevin Lacey, he is a hockey correspondent for Teal Town, USA. Follow him on Twitter at Kevin Lacey 22. And it's been good to chat with him about the Barracuda and about the Sharks organization overall through the Twitters. Welcome to the show, Kevin. How you doing, man?
Hey, can you guys hear me loud and clear, I hope?
Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm so glad to finally be on the show with you guys. I know we've been trying to collaborate here for many months, and my schedule's kind of crazy. And I hope I do you guys well, because it's been about 10 months since I've been able to speak on the Barracuda. And when we last left off, the Barracuda were finally winning. So let's cancel the rest of the season. Dang it.
Yeah, they didn't exactly, they finished last year in the Pacific Division, but hope springs eternal, Kevin. Hope springs eternal. So, by the way, I'm so not used to seeing you with a goatee, with your Twitter avatar, clean shaven and everything. So when you popped up on the lobby screen down below, I'm just like, oh, he's done what a lot of people have done in quarantine and grown some facial hair. So
it's taken me 3 months to get this far. So
hey, you know what? not everyone can have those strong, fuzzy Italian genes like yours truly has. And I can grow this in like 2 weeks. So a blessing in disguise. At least you don't have to shave very often. I think Sean's in the same boat with you there, Kevin.
Very true. Very true.
Yep.
We've got that Sidney Crosby, Logan Couture thing going on where we sort of pull it off after a while eventually. So.
Yeah, just a deep playoff run away from a nice looking goatee there. So,
a deep playoff run.
Deep playoff run. We're talking Stanley Cup final there. But I digress. Kevin, good to have you on the show, my friend. Let's so how we're gonna do this, we're gonna introduce a player. We'll talk about him a little bit. Sean's got a great analytic model that he puts each player through on the AHL level and the ECHL and the SPHL. He's a minor league hockey analytic guru, I tell you. But we'll introduce the player, talk about him a little bit, and then we will throw you the ball and have you run with it. How's that sound?
Hey, that sounds great. Hopefully I can have different answers for each players because the Barracuda are kind of cookie cutter to a fault, but we'll see how this goes. I'm looking forward to it.
Hey, at least we're not talking about Zach Zachenko, right?
Oh, I would love to talk about Zach Zachenko, honestly.
Well, he's not on the list, so sorry I brought his name up. But anyway, no worries. So Max Latunov, let's talk about him. Re-signed on October 5th. Sean, did you want to take this one, or do you want to punt it to me?
I will punt that one to you.
Okay, sounds good. 50 games played in 1920. 3.06 point shares. That's good for the 77th percentile on a per game basis and a second line grade from the model. Latunov finally seemed to put it all together last season in the AHL, as he's always been a player with NHL puck skills and instincts, but he can never consistently find the production to match. His skating is still very much a work in progress, and he does need to be handcuffed to the Barracuda's S&C coach as a 6'4" professional hockey players. They shouldn't weigh 180 pounds. He needs to put a little muscle on him. Strength and conditioning definitely needs to occur there. He should have found the protein powder aisle at GNC during quarantine. You hope he did anyway. I think this season could be one where he enters the conversation for NHL call-ups should he have put on some mass. Kevin, your thoughts, my friend?
First on the weight thing, hey, let's give Max Latunov a little bit of credit because I believe when the Sharks acquired him from the Blues many years ago, he was only weighing $155, which is what I weigh, and I'm 5'9". So at least he has put on some weight since his college days at UConn. But Max Latunov is a very interesting case because 2 seasons ago, his rookie year, he showed some promise, especially early on. He put a lot of points on the board there, but he seemed to fall out of favor with head coach Roy Sommer as the year progressed and eventually became more or less a healthy scratch down the line, got a couple of playoff games in. This second season for him, he did start to earn his coach's trust. He was the leading point scorer on the Barracuda this season. He earned a call-up and scored an NHL goal with the Sharks. I think he's a very well-rounded player, which he doesn't get enough credit for. He is excellent on the faceoffs. He's actually very defensively aware for being a Russian player, a Russian-American player. But yeah, he is a little bit lean. He's not super fast, especially at 6'4". You wouldn't really expect that. But I think Latunov doesn't lack confidence. I just don't know if he has that full gear to be an NHL regular, but he's worth a look here at training camp. There are a lot of guys looking at a lot of spots on the Sharks, so I'm curious to see how it all plays out.
I mean, absolutely. For someone too, it always seems like Russian hockey players come in exactly two molds. Either they love defense or they've never heard of it.
Yeah. Totally, absolutely. But that was Latunov even when he was drafted, but I believe it was the Coyotes, if I'm not mistaken, a while back. But he was known as being a defensive forward with offensive ability, and at UConn, I think his defensive prowess is what led the Sharks to want to get a guy like that, because why not at 6'4", again, really thin, but at 6'4" with two-way capability. And the Sharks have this tendency to try and think outside the box, which is good and bad. But you look at Rudolf Balcers, a Latvian who was playing in Norway for a while, and Max Latunov, a Russian who is at UConn, and things of that nature. So I think that's why the Sharks keyed in on him a little bit. I just hoping that year 3 he continues that progress up, because there was definitely some good developmental signs this season, and we'll see what happens in year 3.
I just can't believe that he used to weigh, what'd you say, 160 pounds?
Somewhere around that, 155, 160. I'm pretty sure.
I mean, someone needs to teach him what Chipotle is. Jeez.
Get that man some carbs.
Yeah. Like, I can't imagine being 6'4" and weighing like, I mean, when I used to compete in MMA, I was a 159-pound fighter. And that was like, I had to cut, I had to basically starve to reach that weight. And I'm 5'10" on a tall day. I couldn't imagine having 6 more inches of height and still being the same weight. Like, geez.
Isn't it nice though, being that size in a way, because you don't have to worry about, hey, Max, you need to watch what you're eating. We're noticing, like he can just go out and do whatever he needs to do.
I mean, I imagine it's got to be frustrating, because he's probably been hearing like, please eat. And he's probably like, I'm trying. I don't know what to do. It just doesn't stick.
And that's the thing. He's 24 years old at this point, so he is going to be 25 here in February. So it's not like he's got a lot of time left to grow in an athletic sense. Yeah. Maybe once your career is over and you're just sitting watching hockey, the AHL.TV, for example, or something like that. But
well, and Kevin, to kind of segue into our next person, I remember. Like I had a bit of a brain fart when I was introducing that first Max. When I was introducing Max, I remember why the second player we've got, Jaden Halbawak. They call him Scrabble for a reason. It's because his name has like 100 letters in it. Halbawaks. Say again, Kevin. Halbawaks?
Yeah, there you go. So we call him Hogwarts, we call him Haagen-Dazs, we call him Hobgoblin, Scrabble, but officially it is Halbawaks.
Halbawaks. Wow.
There you go.
That is a mouthful of marbles right there. My goodness. Well, I noticed in the outline that you and Sean, there was a bit of a disagreement. So we will be civil. We will be cordial, and I'm not going to make this as awkward or any more awkward than it needs to be. So I'm just going to yield the floor and let you guys talk about Mr. Marbles.
Marbles.
55 games played in 1920, 3.08 point shares, good for the 72nd percentile on a per game basis, and a second line grade from the model. If I squint watching him, I could be convinced it's Sam Anas. He has NHL puck skills for sure and can dangle good AHL defenders. He's a good skater, but for his size, in my viewings, he needs another gear. He doesn't have that breakaway speed that you need to be successful at that size. Being 161 pounds isn't getting the job done either, as there are a lot of moments where he's just getting muscled off the pucks by 6'2", 195-pound defensemen in tight. You can absolutely be 5'8" and make it as a professional hockey player. In the NHL, there are a lot of examples of guys who are that tall that make the NHL, but there are only 10 players in the entire NHL since 2016 who are under 165 pounds. And when you look at the list of names, it's either guys you're like, well, I've never heard of him because he only played like 10 games, or they're guys that are that size that have absolutely 100% elite skills. Martin St. Louis, even though that's a little bit earlier than 16-17, had elite puck skills. Guys like, I can't think, I just lost his name, Chicago forward.
Alex DeBrincat?
DeBrincat has one of the best shots in hockey and very, very good and crafty playmaking ability. But like, Halbawaks has NHL skills, but you have to be able to have elite skating at that size, and you definitely need at least 20 pounds, because even those guys who are 5'8", they're 170, 180 pounds. They weigh what Max Latunov does at 6'4", and they have at least enough muscle to not just get one-armed off the puck like they're a defender against Derrick Henry.
All right, so Sean, I agree with your assessment entirely outside, but I'm going to spin it. I do agree with your assessment. I think it's bang on about Halbawaks. I think he does have elite skating. It's how he skates. And I'm going to use Dylan Larkin as an example. Back when he was a rookie, all we heard about is he's one of the fastest players in the world. But it didn't really matter, because when I'd watch him, he'd take all these weird paths to the puck to get to, and never play himself into being an offensive threat. Over time, especially being an NHLer, he has developed that sense and made the best of his skating ability. I think that's where Hobgowax has issues. I think I spent a lot of time this summer observing skating patterns of a lot of the AHL players. And for me, Hobgowax was number one. And I thought maybe that was the homerish take. But out of about 18 teams I looked at, he was still the best. Tanner McMaster was the only one who was close for me in terms of skating ability. But how Hobgowax skates into the offensive zone, he plays himself out. He's usually way faster than his teammates. So he's the first one into the zone, and before anyone else can join him, he's already lost the puck because, like you said, he's very small. He's not strong, like physically strong. So he really needs to have one-on-one battles to use that speed and be effective. And I think that with Hobgowax, most of the time he's skating in 1-on-3, 1-on-4 even. And sometimes he actually comes out ahead skating around everybody with the puck, but it's like he doesn't trust his teammates to get in position, because he does skate at such a faster pace than everyone else that he becomes a puck hog, and that's also a problem. So I think a lot of what you said about him is bang on. He's got the ability. I think he does have the skating. It's putting it all together. That's what it is about the AHL, putting it all together. I don't know if he has that. He is 23 at this point now, going into his third year. I will give a hat tip to Sheng Peng, because I learned that Hobgowax was about to get an NHL call-up before the season ended or got postponed. I think that was more of a show me what you can do, kid kind of thing, because I do think he's a middle six AHLer at best. But with that speed and with how bad the Sharks were last season, it was worth a shot.
I mean, yeah, I think at some point the Sharks were just like, all right, this is over. Let's at least see if our kids do anything cool.
Right.
For me with his skating, like, he has what I would call very good edge work. I wouldn't call it elite, but it's very good. The thing for me with his speed is he has burst, like he has acceleration. He gets to top speed fast. But like, I look at someone like one of his teammates for at least a very, cup of coffee amount of time in Anthony Greco. Like, that's a dude that's an elite skater. He doesn't have the other NHL tools, but like, that's an elite skater to me. But I don't see that level of, like, his edge work it's not as good as Greco's, because to me, Greco's the best skater in the AHL. But he has good edge work that if I squinted at it is comparable to Greco's, but he doesn't have that F1, gear to me. And I mean, if you want to disagree with me, that's fine. I don't take it personally. And
I like that you brought up Anthony Greco, because it was going to be this awesome comparison to see the two with each other being on the same team after the Sharks acquired him, but he's already gone. He's gone to Hartford. So when the few times I did see Anthony Greco, I didn't think he looked better skating wise than Hobgowax, but it was such a small sample. And I've heard the same thing from so many people as you, Sean, about Anthony Greco's skating. And I wish I'd got more of an opportunity to see it in Teal. But Greco was the Sharks' yearly, we're going to acquire him and let him go for no reason player. And so best of luck to him there. But I like your comparison. Like, I like that you're comparing really fast players to one another and talking about edge work and stuff. I don't hear things like that too often in my realm. So I appreciate that, what you're bringing to the table, Sean.
Yeah, absolutely. And Greco was someone too that I did a lot of film study for when we talked about him in Hartford in the signing. And I remember someone, and this is kind of unrelated, but I'll get to the point eventually, is someone told me the best way to describe Mario Lemieux is if you took all the numbers off the jerseys and sat way up in the stands where you couldn't tell who was who, you would still know that Mario was special when he touched the puck, just because of the magic that you could feel when he played, that smoothness, that ability that you knew separated him from the pack. I was actually watching a game that had Greco in it, and I wasn't there to watch him. And I saw him take about 4 strides with the puck, and I was like, oh, hello there. Who is and it didn't occur to me that that's who it was at first. And I'm like, oh, that's Anthony Greco. He's the guy that broke McDavid's speed record. Like, yep, that tracks. But like, he was one of those guys that right away when I saw, I think it was like an ankle to ankle mohawk turn with the puck, and I'm like, oh, that's not AHL level footwork there. That's an NHL caliber edge work. And then I saw him just turn and take off, and I'm like, okay, he had that Lemieux quality for his skating. And I will say, Haubogawak's one of the things I did notice about him is his glide is very fast. Like he does, like he'll take 2 or 3 strides and then just kind of like glide. And I'm like, he gets a lot of push from that glide. Although part of my theory is when you're 161 pounds, it doesn't take a lot of force to move that body, that fast without effort. So there might be some of it to that. But yeah, I played the game for a long time. I've studied the game for a long time. I'm not very good at it anymore. Not to say that I probably ever was. I mean, I was a junior B washout. So, but like I definitely, when I watch guys, and CC can attest to this too. It's a lot of like, that was interesting. Rewind. Keep rewinding. Watching the same thing 4, 5, 6 times to finally figure out what's going on there. Because unfortunately, some of the AHL camera angles are not great, Bob.
I love that. I love hearing things like that. We need more people out there analyzing this. So it's awesome. And one of the things you're talking about with Anthony Greco and how he looked like magical out there. I think that's the frustrating thing about observing the Barracuda over the last 2 years, really, and kind of hot and cold, just historically with the Sharks minor league teams, is that the players who are magical end up getting called up immediately. And I don't know, with a guy like Latunov, with a guy like Haubogawaks, even Chmelevski. Chmelevski was the guy that we thought 100%, this is the guy. He almost made the Sharks the year before. He went back to juniors. And I don't want to dig too deep into this because I could talk for like a half hour about it. But I think the players that we thought could be magical this season were not deployed in, I'm not a head coach. So shut up, Kevin. But the deployment frustrated me. I think they went with too much of a balanced approach. So maybe a guy like Haubogawaks can produce magic, but I think the way the system was prevented that. A guy like Chmelevski, I think 100%. Ivan Shirkovich, who was thankfully to me on a season-long loan in Russia this year, so that he can do something and not just play 8 minutes with no power play time and he's expected to score. Like I don't understand those things. So with a guy like Greco, again, you're talking about he looked magical. I didn't get a chance to see it because he was just thrown in to be a guy on the Barracuda, and that it was just very frustrating.
Yeah, that's fair. And I've on this show too, we have also been frustrated on the usage of some people. A particular Brian Pino in Hershey, for example.
There you go.
As I will continue to campaign, free Brian Pino.
Hashtag free Brian Pino.
Hey, he got some playoff time in the NHL at least. So
yeah, but like it was baffling to me. Him and I can't think of the other player right now who used to play for Charlotte. Were the only 2 players in the past 5 years in the AHL that scored at least 20 goals that scored 0 power play goals because they were not put on the power play. How do you have a guy that scores 20 goals in the AHL and you don't put him on the power play? Free Brian Pino. Yeah. Anyway, we have to get to our last guy here. Otherwise, we will be here all night.
And trust me, I can talk.
One of the reasons I brought you on. That's a good problem to have,
Yeah. Cece, would you like to introduce this one because I have no idea how to say this name.
Antti Suomela.
Hey, there you go.
Suomela re-signed on October 6th. 14 games played in 1920. That's a .89 point share. Unfortunately, that was not enough games for a percentile rank in Sean's analytic model. But I will say that it's hard to say for sure which side of San Jose he ends up on. Personally, this is a guy with taxi squad, drinking game, We've said that about 50 times already, Kevin. This is a guy with Taxi Squad written all over him at age 26. I don't think he develops any further, and he is who he is. In my viewings, he's a guy who really isn't great at anything. He isn't great at anything, rather, but he isn't bad at anything. You know, he's middle of the road in a lot of instances. He's a hard worker, good PK guy. He makes subtle, good plays like finding space in the middle on rush chances, winning corner battles, and making small plays to continue a cycle in the offensive zone, as opposed to flashy dekes and big goals, you know, the thing that make it on SportsCenter, like Sean mentioned earlier. His game lacks that consistent play driving ability, but he's capable of holding his own in limited roles. To me, that says Taxi Squad duty, you know, like we've talked about. San Jose, the Barracuda, and the Sharks literally are in the SAP Center. So you need a guy. A Taxi Squad's kind of a moot point for a lot of the California teams, I think. But Suomela definitely could be a contender.
Antti Suomela, or as you might hear me call him Suomela, because in Finland he's Suomela. So, but in American it's Suomela. So we go with that.
Either way.
Yeah, but he really is a frustrating player. He does a lot of things well, but he doesn't stand out. He is a player who, in his rookie year, again 2 years ago, made the Sharks out of camp look great in camp. Played okay for the Sharks and eventually lost his role, got assigned to the Barracuda, and did absolutely nothing, to which he was scratched for most of the playoffs, healthy scratch for most of the playoffs. Coming from making the NHL team in camp to not playing AHL playoff games. And even when he did, it's not because he's a bad kid. You look at him, he's got a great smile. He's always happy. He's engaged, but he doesn't bring enough to the table. And he did improve this past season. Again, not an attitude thing. He just seemed to shine more, but not enough. And I don't know if he makes the NHL team this year. Again, a lot of players looking at NHL spots or positions. I do have him flagged as the first line center on the Barracuda this season. I think he is one of the odd men out on this team. And at 26, if I'm not mistaken, a former leading scorer in Liga in Finland, that should say he can pull it off in the NHL. He hasn't even fully convinced me at the AHL level yet. I don't know. I mean, with the number or the limited number of roster positions available on the Sharks and the Barracuda, because they basically just signed everyone hoping someone will stand out, I was a little surprised they re-signed Suomela. But here he is. I hope he can take another step forward. I just don't know if it's enough, guys.
I think for how Cece and I kind of are theorizing, at least, that a Taxi Squad gets constructed, is on this basis, and I'm sure our listeners have heard me say this to every guest we've had on for the past, 4 episodes, of like, to me, this seems like something where I want known quantities. I want 4 to 6 players who I know exactly what I'm going to get out of. They were guys that are your, 13th forward most nights. They're someone who I can plug into a 3rd, 4th line role and won't get me killed. And that very much feels like him to me. He's someone who's a bit of a known quantity, and I don't have to worry about him pouting in the press box because he's not getting games. He's, just not necessarily thrilled to be there, but he knows what his role is, and he knows that he's there because that's what his role is. To not be, trying to fight for ice time or get upset when you're not getting played. Of, hey, we might need you 10 nights this year, and that's all you're going to get, but that's what we need you for. Whereas like you put someone who's a little younger, a little more, still fighting for ice time, and they're going to have a different opinion of spending 2 straight weeks in the press box. Whereas I feel like someone like him, it's going to be more of, he knows what's expected. This is the job that he does.
Absolutely. I have never, of any player except for maybe Keaton Middleton, I can't think of any bad day that Antti Suomela has ever had. I mean, he got hurt earlier in the season, and that might be the only time I ever saw him where he didn't just have a smile on the face and look like he was enjoying himself, working hard, but enjoying himself out there. Taxi Squad. So I think because of my time off from talking about hockey, I'm still not in tune with taxi squads mentally yet. So I'm thinking of 23-man roster, But yeah, I think Suomela absolutely could be a taxi squad guy for the Sharks this season. And we're probably going to use a lot of taxi squad players, to be honest. But if in a more traditional sense, I think he starts with the Barracuda. But yeah. I mean, I can't say anything bad about the guy. I've never met him, but he just seems like a really good player to have, or as we would say in the wrestling biz, a real good hand. But I would love to see more out of Suomela this season. I don't know if he's going to get the chance and if he has the goods to deliver.
Yeah, for sure. I'd say in a normal season, I mean, I'd pencil him in 1C, 2C on the Barracuda for sure. But
yeah,
he's in this kind of like weird taxi squads, where I have that feeling you guys are going to be joining the 49ers and playing in Arizona somehow. He's going to end
we
up.
are playing in Arizona. we're starting training camp in Arizona.
But I think it's going to be one of those weird things where, because California is basically closed, period, that you're going to end up with that. But I agree too. And I also would just point out, guys who are like that always have that upbeat personality. It's to a T. They're almost always finished. I'm actually convinced there's a secret law in Finland where you're not allowed to frown.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I mean,
it seems like every time when it's like, oh, there's always that guy in the locker room who's just never had a bad day. I'm like, he's finished, right? Yeah, that's why. Like Russians aren't allowed to smile. The Finns are the opposite. They're not allowed to frown.
Yeah, the Sharks had Ville Nieminen many years ago, and he always showed teeth. He was always smiling or grimacing, but he always tried to pull it off.
Maybe that's the thing, is that you have to show teeth, like not necessarily smile, but you got to be like, just show teeth. But oh, well, hey, Kevin, like I was telling Sean before we brought you on, you are the final guest of the CC and Sean hosted iteration of the In the Corners podcast, because of the fact that I'm going to be moving over to Full Press Hockey. I'm going to be kickstarting the AHL coverage. Sean is going to be coming with me. And also Scott McDonald, the guy that I host the Colorado Eagles podcast, and it's going to be called Front Range Hockey now. Covers some college teams here in Colorado too. But Kevin, you are the last guest of the In the Corners podcast in this iteration. So feel honored, feel blessed, feel the positive vibes and the good energy, my friend. And honestly, it's been a blast. Like, you really brought a lot to talking about the Barracuda and the Sharks. And the sin bin. Like, I'm the only Pacific Division guy aside from, Paige Stewart. She, covers the Stockton Heat, was on earlier, but like, there's not a whole lot of Pacific Division coverage. So to have you on and to have you talk about the Barracuda and the Sharks and everything, it's been a blast, man.
Hey, I appreciate being the last guest. I mean, I felt like I had to bring it for you guys here, being at the end, to really bookend this whole thing. So again, we've been wanting to collaborate for a while. So I'm really happy to talk Barracuda, because my whole thing, everyone out there listening and watching, is we just need more coverage of minor league players, of developmental players. And it's a niche audience, but sometimes it's really hard to find this kind of information, and especially with this new Pacific Division, new-ish Pacific Division in the AHL, there are definitely some alleys that haven't been explored yet. So I try and bring everything that I can to my Twitter account at Kevin Lacey 22 and to Teal Town USA, where I try to have an In the Reef vodcast. Unfortunately, we haven't had one for about a year, but we're going to try and get another one out. Nick Nolenberger, who does the play-by-play for the Barracuda, he is a frequent guest on our show when we have shows. So hopefully I can get back on track this season. This is the first Barracuda vodcast that I've been on in a year. So it's like I said, I can talk for days. I'm talking for days right now. I really need to be quiet. But thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. I've had a blast.
Yeah, that's been Sean. Something that we've been like, one of the reasons that I feel like this has always been a fun podcast to do is there isn't a lot out there in the AHL space for coverage, for analysis, for, news and that kind of thing. It's not a big group of people that does it. And I think that there are people that are interested in hearing, good breakdowns of players, and group, guys that have a lot of fun doing it along the way, which I definitely think is very much our niche. So that's something that we have tried to bring here on this podcast, and we'll be taking with us to our new home. And I'm sure that at some point when we need to dive into the Barracuda, we will be bringing you back on.
And I hope that I can talk about us being better than a 29th place team by 1,000th of a point in the standings. So,
hey, and Kevin, being a fellow wrestling fan myself, I do want to say, let me tell you something, brother. And
ooh,
yeah, let me tell you about the madness. Yeah, Miss Elizabeth's here, and I'm going to tell you about the San Jose Barracuda. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that was awesome. Now you're gonna make me want to bring out my Bret Hart shades that are right behind me here, but I can't top that Macho Man though.
Yeah, that was really good.
Oh, thank you. I've got a thing for voices, and I love pro wrestling. You just dial it up to 11, you take it over the top. But Kevin, I wanted to say, I'm glad that we could shake the rust off for you, because it's been difficult for everybody not having hockey for such a long period of time, and then such an abbreviated, 1 or 2 month bubble season for a lot of teams, and postseason rather. But I'm glad that we could help shake the rust off, man. And if you ever need a writing caveat outside of Tealtown, USA, I know, I had to throw it in there.
I want to, I do. It's the time, the time commitment.
I know for sure. But we'll talk more. We'll talk more, and we'll definitely be in touch. Kevin, appreciate you coming on, man.
Thank you for having me, guys. Be safe. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. It's coming up.
The Barracuda are finishing 2020 unbeaten in regulation in 5. Dating back to February, but we are. Give us this. It's all we had last season, please.
Take the win where you can.
That's right.
And at least we can look forward to, this will be the first year that nobody accidentally writes 2020 in January.
Oh, absolutely. 2021. We're all going to do that for sure.
Yep.
Kevin, thanks again, man. Appreciate having you on. See you, bud. All right, Kevin Lacey, Tealtown, USA, knocking the rust off. Loving it. Well, we're done. We are done with our signings and re-signings preview episodes. We kind of had to put it on full speed ahead for these last 2 episodes, because we got the news that, I was taken on and accepted on at Full Press Hockey. And yeah, we just kind of had to put it into full gear for the Central and the Pacific Division. But you guys, you hung in there with us. And like we've said before, we will definitely give more attention that these teams need in the team previews that we have coming up for our new podcast that we are going to be debuting on the Full Press Hockey and Full Press Coverage Podcast Network. They have a ton of them. If you want to go check them out, fullpresscoverage.com, fullpresshockey.com. Sean, do you want to reveal the name of the new podcast?
Our podcast is called The Calder Farmstead.
An AHL podcast. We've already got the theme music made up. We are waiting on the graphics department, I guess you could call it, to get it. Ian Glendon, my new boss over at Full Press Hockey, is going to be taking care of that. I don't want to spend too much time pumping our own tires for that, because I feel like it would be maybe a poke in the eye, a stick in the eye to the sin bin. So I will end it with this. I will say, hosting this show longer than the initiator, our editor-in-chief for the sin bin, Matthew Harding. Like I mentioned a few episodes ago, I have hosted this show longer than Harding did. And he's the one who gave, in the corners, it's first breath, as it were. And so for Matt Harding, for Zach Corder, the managing editor, Matt Thomas, the chief tech officer, everyone at the Sin Bin. There's so many names. I have an article coming out on the Sin Bin on December 31st with all the writers and photographers that have influenced me and have been a part of that journey 3+ years, starting in October, November 2017. I just really want to say thank you guys. Thanks to the Sin Bin for allowing me and giving me a platform to really talk about the ECHL and the Idaho Steelheads, and the AHL and the Colorado Eagles and everything in between, you know, covering playoff series at the ECHL level of teams that, you know, I wasn't in market, but we needed somebody and I stepped up to the plate. And again, I thank the Sin Bin and Matt Harding and everyone involved for the opportunity to host this show and to be a part of, you know, the written the written content that we produced every day. And so, Sean, I know that you, aside from this podcast, your affiliation with the Sin Bin kind of ends there. But anything you'd like to say?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not a writer for the Sin Bin. My affiliation is kind of loose in that sense of the only thing I contribute is this podcast. I'm not a writer for the Sin Bin because, fun fact, I actually don't know how to write. So I've been just here doing the podcast portion of this, being on the show with you in the corners. And I'm very grateful to, you know, Matthew Harding and you for allowing me to do that because I am not very professional. I'm not, you know, a polished journalist. I'm a guy who watches a lot of film and writes stupid jokes. That's been my contribution here. And I'm glad that I've gotten to have this outlet and that, you know, we'll be continuing that with you at our new gig. But if it didn't start here, I don't think it ever would have happened. So I am very thankful to the Sin Bin for that. And they continue to do good work, bringing, you know, voices to minor league hockey stories. And they're going to continue that long after we're gone from this podcast. I mean, not from life. That's kind of grim, but just I do want to say I am appreciative of the, you know, the opportunity that we've been given here to have some fun with this and make it our own. And I'm very excited for our podcast going forward. And I'm sure that in the corners, you know, whoever champions the show after us will do it the justice that we did.
Yes, and I hope In the Corners continues on. I mean, it's an institution now for the Sin Bin, through ECHL, through AHL. You know, I know Harding and Corder launched the 3 Periods podcast for the ECHL coverage, and they're doing a bang up job with that. But yeah, I do hope that someone does take up the In the Corners mantle. Whether it does, you know, immediately get utilized or may sit up on a shelf for a little while, you know, collect a little dust and then, you know, repurposed down the road. 95 episodes, that's a pretty damn good run, you know? And so I don't think this is over for In the Corners. I think that, again, this is an institution for the Sin Bin. And with what Harding and Bobby Metcalf did back in the day and what I've done solo and what Sean and I have done, as a unit and as a package deal, as we said to begin this show, I think it's gonna continue on for sure. But this iteration, this chapter of the In the Corners podcast is coming to a close. So I feel it's fitting to just say thank you guys for coming out. Thank you guys for showing up, and thanks for listening. And stick with us if you want to. You know what we bring to the table, and we're going to continue bringing it to the table. And it's going to be a great challenge moving forward. And so with that, I think it's fitting.
Thanks for listening to the In the Corners podcast. Stay caught up with the latest minor league hockey news by downloading the Sin Bin app for Android and Apple devices.
All sports fans have experienced this, right? Something amazing happens on the ice and you think, man, I wish I'd have been filming. Now with the Sporfy app, you can replace that thought with a click. With just one click of a button, Sporfy captures the past 15 seconds of action so you can instantly replay and share your favorite moments all without having to film. And it's easy too. All you have to do is download the app on iOS or Android devices and experience an all-new way of filming sports highlights.